And so just letting everyone know that this recording is going to be uploaded onto YouTube, onto our SICS webinar channel. And so if you're not comfortable with that, you might want to turn your camera off. But thank you all for coming along today and joining us for Marika's presentation, sharing the recent research conducted looking at school library literature over the past 50 years that she led and has now been accepted for publication, her first official publication. So congratulations, Marika. And this was a TL team joint effort, but Marika led the whole project and drove it forward. So she's sharing the outcomes today. And welcome, Marika, if you'd like to take over.
Thank you, Kay. So now I haven't ever done this on this particular way it's showing on the platform, so forgive me if I have a few hiccups. But it's great to be here today to talk about our scoping out of the school library literature, where we looked and did a scoping review of 50 years of school library literature with some light bibliometric analysis, where I was assisted by the fabulous TL team, Crystal Gagan-Spriggs, Kay Adoni, and Casey Garrison. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra, and Biripi peoples of Australia, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which CSU's campuses are located. And I would like to extend that acknowledgement to the Camaragal people, the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which I live and work and from which I'm presenting to you today, as well as to the traditional owners and custodians of the lands upon which all those attending today or viewing on the recording are currently located. And feel free to pop in the chat where you're coming from today as we jump in and look at the history and literature review. So our goal with this study was to take a broad view of the literature related to teacher librarianship and school libraries over quite a broad period of time. We were considering a special issue of the Journal of the Australian Library and Information Association regarding sort of 50 years of school librarianship education in Australia and the 50th anniversary of the librarian studies in Charles Sturt University and its predecessors. And so that's kind of what sparked our idea of looking at the literature related to that specialization over that 50-year period of time. And so because we were looking at that, we sort of first started with just a little look at what is the history of teacher librarianship as a specialization in Australia. And looking back, it has been recognized as a specialization sort of from the 1950s to 1960s when some specific elements of training were introduced, but only from about the 1970s has it had tertiary level higher education options that specifically support school libraries and teacher librarianship. So before we started out, we had a look at what are some of the existing reviews that exist related to this field and of the literature and to get an idea of where we were going. And we noticed a pattern that the reviews either tended to be a broad range of literature, sort of a broad question being asked, but looking at a very narrow period. And we were especially interested in Kimmel et al. In 2023, who did school library research literature, but only for the year 2019. And then, let me try this. Koufagiannakis et al., 2004, sort of looked at library and information science research that supports evidence-based librarianship, but again, they only looked at a single year, or 2001. The other direction reviews tended to go were a wider time period, but a really narrow focus. So Sadiq et al. Looked at 70 years of literature, but they were specifically looking at research performance of authors of library and information science literature published in the Arab world. And then Spearing et al. Had 12 years of literature that they looked at, but again, they were just looking at school library research on LGBTQIA plus topics. So a very narrow focus. And as I said, our goal was a sort of broad look at the literature, as well as that broad period of time, that wide window. And so that led to our research questions. And they're relatively simple. We wanted to look at three things. First, how many articles addressing teacher librarianship in school libraries as a broad topic were published between 1975 and 2024, so looking over 50 years. Then what could we learn from analyzing some of the bibliographic data from that literature? And what are some themes that we might be able to identify in the literature over that period? And so that led us in to our methodology of a scoping review, where we followed we're guided by the framework that Arksey and O'Malley put out in 2005. And we decided to do our search in content aggregators, such as ProQuest and EBSCOhost, because those, and Lista, because those were represent a better depth of the literature in our field, as opposed to some of the more commonly used Scopus and Web of Science that are often used in bibliographic analysis. And because we were looking at a very large data set, we looked for some help in screening, and we used Covidence. So in Covidence, we were looking at the, so we did our content aggregator search, which was fairly broad. We looked at just sort of school library with a wild card at the end, and teacher library with a wild card at the end, to really have a very broad sweep of the literature available to us that looked into those sort of broad topics. And we used Covidence to screen from our original 10,480 results, to remove duplicates, and to screen automatically first, and then to screen the titles and abstracts against our inclusion criteria, and our and also manually remove any remaining duplicates, in order to come up then with our data set that we did a bit of bibliometric analysis on. We chose to do a bit of bibliographic analysis rather than a sort of full text review in a systematic way, because we had such a large set of data, and bibliometric analysis is a good starting point to interrogate large sets of data and to illuminate patterns that might be therein, with the hope that perhaps we would then be able to do some deeper looks later on. Some limitations we came across, because we used content aggregators as our source for our journal articles that we were including. Some of the types of bibliometric analysis that are available when you use the sort of citation indexes like Scopus and Web of Science, things like some of the mapping of keyword co-occurrences, some of the citation mapping. Those were things that we weren't able to do because the file types didn't match up with the programs that do those types of analyses. So that limited what we were able to use our data with. Also, when we went and used Covidence, it was our first time using it, and we didn't realize that after the title and abstract screening, it reduced the set of data fields available to us from, I think it was 64 to 18. So a lot of the things we thought we might be able to investigate sort of disappeared once we did the screening. But with that, we were still able to use in vivo, a little bit of VosViewer, although I don't know if that made it into the paper, and Microsoft Excel to interrogate the data that we did have and to find some interesting patterns and things worth discussing, which we'll have a look at now. So first, we were able to look at the number of articles published per year that fit our inclusion criteria. And as you can see, across all the 50 years, there was representation at least at some level every year. We see a really large sort of jump from the late 90s, then peaking in sort of that 2016 to 2019 period, which is over here. But so we do see sort of the trend line is going upwards. But then we did notice that there really was a really sharp decline and fall off after 2020. And so that was something that we noted. We also took a look at what were the top 10 journals over the 50 years in terms of publication. And you can see that Teacher Librarian, which is has been published in the US or Canada over its lifetime, was by far the largest contributor to our data set over the 50 years, followed by Knowledge Quest, which is American Association of School Libraries blog, and then School Libraries Worldwide, and Access from good old Australia is in the top 5 there too. So taking some of that information onward, we considered what that might show us and what conclusions we could draw from that, or what possibilities arose from looking at that data. And we were considering particularly that decline from 2021 onwards. And some of the possible contributors that we thought could have contribute to that, which is what contributors do, is, as you notice, Teacher Librarian was well far out and beyond the greatest contributor to this body of literature, and they ceased publication in 2021. That was also around the time when the pandemic was of COVID-19 was causing lots of disruptions, both in academia and the patterns and what people were able to do, and pivoting to different types of modes of teaching and learning and research and ways to interact. Also, publishing had disruptions. And so there is a possibility that some of the COVID-19 disruptions, some things may have lasting effects, but some may also show in future a rise in the area, because they might get offset, because with publishing, as we all know, there's a bit of a lag with the research and with the publishing and for things to come out. So that may be ameliorated in time. We also noted that there is globally a reduction in teacher librarian numbers, and a tendency for there to be a redeployment of TLs to different roles within the school, and that those were supposed to be different points, and that because several, if we look back to some of the top hitters in our publications list, several of them, like Knowledge Quest, School Libraries Worldwide, Access, are publications that practitioners are highly encouraged to contribute to, and that they do provide a lot of the contributions there. So the reduction in numbers and the redeployment of TLs from their core business to doing things like covering classes on a casual basis because of teacher shortages and things like that could be contributing to the decrease in overall literature related to the specialization. Also, there have been reductions in the number of programs specializing in teacher librarianship, and therefore the academics employed to focus in that specialization, which can then have a knock-on effect to the number of research publications that are able to be put out. So these were very concerning to us and highlighted for us the need for advocacy. We did see that big swell of publications sort of in the late 1990s through the 2010s. And there we have documentation that there was a lot of strong advocacy efforts in that time, which we think may have contributed to that really strong period of a lot of plentiful literature available. And the decline has led us to think that a boost in advocacy efforts at this time would be really helpful and is needed if we wish to continue representing this specialization as an important and distinct area of study and area of research. That worked better. Another thing that we looked at were authorship patterns. And what we looked at specifically were total articles published and what number and percentage of them were solo authored and what number or percentage of them were co-authored in each time period. And we looked at that overall, which showed roughly 72% were solo authored over the whole 50-year period and about 28% co-authored. But what we really noticed, what was interesting, is that in the last 3 decades, there has been a shift from solo authored predominantly to a greater share of the articles being co-authored. And so that was something that we have noted. We didn't have time to go too much into thinking about what the reasons for that might be, and sort of have that in mind, as that might be an area that would be worth further study about what those patterns are like and what's causing them. And I see Philip has made a comment that it might be interesting to consider whether the literature on teacher librarianship specifically or school libraries more broadly is declining more. And that is a really interesting point. And if we can figure out how to crunch that data, it might be something we look at in the future. And the other thing we've looked at within the publications are some of the countries that the publications are coming from. And in our data set, we saw that the United States was far and away in the lead for publication origin of countries. And then Canada was also strong, about half the number that were in the United States. Then the United Kingdom with 5 publications, which is close to Canada. Germany was the one, well, Germany and the Netherlands, not necessarily dominantly English speaking, but countries that still had a good percentage, in that this was drawn from the top 30 publications that by representation in our data set. And then Australia and South Africa and the Netherlands all came in with 1 publication in that top 30. It all adds up to 31 because Teacher Librarian, as I mentioned, has over its publishing, over the 50-year publishing time period, come from both the United States and Canada. So one of the things that we came up with looking at those patterns is that there does seem to be a Western country publishing dominance in the specialization. Part of that may be accounted for by the fact that we did limit our search to things in the English language, but other sources also corroborate that there is a stronger infrastructural and institutional support for school libraries in the United States and Canada and Australia that has sort of been in place since the 1970s. And so that has likely provided an atmosphere in which those publications can publish in this field, and they have the depth of sort of contributors to the literature. There's also the possibility, there are sort of 2 main models of school libraries, an American model and the British model. And the countries that came up highest in our showed the most number of publications with relevant articles that were included in our review tend to be following the American model. So we thought that, and that tends to be in more of the Western countries, Western world countries. So that was something that we again thought it could be looked into further down the track. The last thing we looked at were keywords. So we put the titles, the journal article titles from our data set into NVivo 14, and it generated a keyword frequency table. And so this was just keywords in isolation. As you can see, it didn't look at co-occurrence, and it gave us a count of the number of times that they were found in the titles. And from that, we took a sort of initial surface layer look at themes that might be arising in the articles. And 2 of the major themes that stood out to us were that looking at the words information, collection, skills, and media sort of showed that the diverse role of teacher librarians and school libraries was being reflected in here, that it's not just about sort of reading or managing the collection that's in there, but that processing information, developing skills, and engaging with media are areas that teacher librarians and school libraries are being looked at in the literature. Also, the words community and social and programs and services hitting up, and I forgot to mention the keyword list was sort of our top 100 keywords. Those all appearing in that top 100 section sort of pointed to the broader engagement strategies that are a key focus of teacher librarians. Reaching out into the community, engaging with the school community and the wider community, and having sort of programs and services that go, again, beyond just managing the collection. And that then led us to the thought, as you've noticed, it's kind of crept into some of the things we were looking at, that what are future places we can go? What are the implications of this research, and what are some of the future directions that we might take based on this data set or inspired by it? And so some of the highlights were really standing out, that trend of the declining articles from 2021 onwards. And so looking into that brought up the need for advocacy, and then also that impetus to explore, to identify the factors that are leading to that decline. Is it just in this specific area of the literature, or is it throughout other related literature areas? Is it this field? Is it publishing in general? Like, what are the factors that are leading into this? And then to look at what can we do about that. And what we can do is not gesture so much that our webcams fall down. Then looking at the themes, that really had a place to maybe look at further research to jump off from, or further ways to interrogate the data that we've gathered. Like if we can find a way to clean up the data to explore keyword co-occurrence, as well as just that individual thing, to see if there is more information we can get by seeing how these words come together in phrases and it existing together. Also, possibly looking at comparing the themes and the keywords and things that came out from the titles to higher education programs' learning objectives, to see where do they match and where do they not. Where is there literature that is indicating a way the specialization is going that may not yet be captured in higher education programs? And also, where are places where we aren't having sufficient literature to cover areas? And then also thinking about perhaps doing some more sort of narrowly focused reviews that are a bit more in-depth based on the themes that were illuminated by the keywords from the scoping review. And we already have one further project underway that's related to the data that we've already collected, where Crystal is going to lead this project, and I'm going to assist her to explore some of those themes a little more closely by doing a content analysis of the Australian titles that we came up with in our review that were in our data set. So that's, as I said, sort of we've at least got the idea and decided to put some time to it, and that, watch this space. That will be coming out sometime. There's the crew who are part of it, and I have the references are available through the QR code or the link at the end of the slide. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. Just look in the chat. Okay. So Kay was saying, yeah, there were lots of areas we wanted to dig deeper. but the decline does seem to be worldwide and sort of topic-wide. Yes, Philip does mention something. That is something we address in the paper, that there is, because we had such a wide period of time that we were looking at, and that kind of goes over a wide range of technological change. Some of the time periods in our data may be underrepresented because of digitization issues and whether or not they have been brought onto the databases, and that there may be varying proportions of the literature over the period that are indexed, and that may affect some of the things we did. We did address that consideration somewhat in our discussion. See.
And thank you so much for doing all this. Do you want to keep responding to the questions in the chat before we open up to?
Yeah, I was looking through to that, but if people have something to speak out, that's fine too. I can keep my place here. There seem to be more comments than questions.
Yeah, they're more observations. So
yeah.
If there's any questions or anything you'd like to ask Marika about the research.
Or anything you think I should change before I give this at Rails. You're my test audience.
Marika, did you say you searched in Lister? Is that where you looked?
ProQuest Education, EBSCO Education, and Lister.
Okay, so does that cover ERIC? Because that's the big education database, isn't it?
That's in one of the education ones. I can't remember if it's EBSCO or ProQuest.
Yeah, okay. Do you reckon you'd get a different result if you looked at Google Scholar? Would you catch some more of those non-English language ones? I'm just wondering whether there's this huge growth.
Well, I mean, we did limit to English language.
Yeah.
So it was one of our limits, and it was one of our inclusion criteria that it be in English because
you can't read it otherwise.
Yeah.
I was just wondering whether
that's the one we all have in common, and all have well enough to distinguish.
Yeah.
EBSCO, thanks, Casey.
I'm just wondering whether there's like this big body of data or publishing in an Arab world or something that we just don't know about because we can't read it.
Yeah, I think we found in Google Scholar that there was so much repetition from what was in the databases. Yeah, it was too difficult to delineate.
The results that you got, yeah.
Yeah,
because there's so much, it's a bit overwhelming to really interrogate, which is why we decided not to use it, because the team had that experience.
Yeah,
we had,
and we're also all beginners
for that as well. I forget what the reference is, but as we had just done a systematic review the Prisma review for Library Trends Special Issue, also edited by Philip. We knew kind of Google Scholar wasn't really useful for that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it would be really interesting to know, worldwide. And I think maybe with AI translation, we might get a bit more across, cross-cultural publication, hopefully, maybe.
And that could be that could be a refinement, or another place to look is to sort of, take a learning from this, that kind of that first 25 years, there was a lot missing because of the digitization gaps and things like that, to maybe take a sort of smaller window, but look at a larger number of languages included to catch some of those. Yeah, Nigeria did actually have representation in, because Casey's mentioning that the Google Scholar alerts, she tends to get a bunch of things from Nigeria, South Africa, South Korea, and Pakistan. And I definitely remember Nigeria was sort of in the mix. I cut down the number we were looking at so that it would fit nicely for a journal table insertion. And that cut Nigeria out of what we discussed in the article. But yeah. In the limitations, we did comment that we are, we did limit to English, and that is a limitation, and does skew the lens towards the Western publishing, but we did get representation from other areas. Yeah, Casey's just saying Nigerian academics publish in school libraries worldwide a lot, because they have a strong representation in the IASL.
Is there an IFLA group for school librarians?
Yes.
Maybe they've got access to some old, indexes of school library literature in other languages that might be able to pick apart, and then you could use your AI translator to understand what they've been writing about over that period.
Yeah, possibly. Wasim?
Thanks, Marika. Just a quick question. So obviously, you looked at, the last 50 years. So I wonder, do you plan to then propose some of the areas that should be researched in future or in near future? Like when you're looking at the last 50 years, there are, a body of the research. There must be some gaps, and what is going on right now, for example, in academia or in professional practice, where some of the focus should be paid in future, So this, I think there's a value in talking about something about the future as well, that, okay, where should be.
Yeah, that was part of our hopes and our goals. When we hit such a large number of things to interrogate, and with some of the hiccups we had along the way, as I mentioned, about what data we ended up with in the end, we weren't able to address that at this time. That is something that, yeah, I would like to look into potentially. But looking at the data we have, it's going to take a bit of time to figure out how to construct that question, and whether we would need to do a new sort of catch of data to look at it. But yes, I agree with you. That was our original hope, was to look at sort of looking at the past to inform the future. But that was so big, it got away from us.
And for Rail's presentation, just my suggestion is that it would be good to just provide bit of a more, I would say, reasoning around why scoping review. Because if there have been literature reviews already done, why didn't, let's suppose, use the systematic review, for example, and why scoping review? So, and why this particular framework from this person and not the other ones. For example, there's a one which is given from, I think it is from medical science, which is quite well known. I forgot the name. So, but yeah,
I'm just rapidly jotting notes down.
Yeah, so. Taking notes. Remember, this is being recorded.
Right on the top of my head.
This. So, any other questions or comments?
And thanks, Wasim. I did cut a lot of stuff about sort of the methodology at choices and things. So I will add some of that back in.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming along today and for joining us. And thank you to those people who are watching this on our YouTube channel. And thank you, Marika, for very interesting presentation. And always great to hear that school library research is happening. So I know that, but as a host, trying to say something. So but yeah, really appreciate your time, everyone, and we shall see you in a month for another SICS webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. And sorry, I can't figure out how to stop the presentation.